We share. Oh, take a ride.
My name is MACHIRA ISAAC MAVALLA. Most people know me as Isaac, but MACHIRA is actually my first name. My growing up, I had a very exciting and exhilarating childhood. I really enjoyed my time growing up in Nigeria. Kaduna per se, that's the one I remember the most, but I was born in Jingri. My dad is a minister, so a pastor, as well as an academician, so he's an associate professor. Growing up in Kaduna, some of the things I remember the most was studying in the Adventist school, which was really exciting. I had a whale of a time, and it's interesting because all of the people that I've seen around that time, I still have contact with, one of which is yourself. My secondary school days was really interesting time in my life growing up. So it was a boarding school. I had the option to choose. My parents gave me the option to choose between Adventist Secondary Technical College, Aztec, in Owerenta, which is in the east, and Babcock High School. And I always thought, well, if I was going to go to university, I'm likely to come to Babcock anyway. And so therefore, it was interesting as a explorer that I am, and I like to go as many places as I can. I thought I'll go to the east, I'll probably not get another opportunity. But the most important reasons why I went to Aztec was because it had technical in the name. Engineering. I've always been passionate about engineering. In fact, since I was 6, coming back to primary school, I remember one time, somebody called Isaac Dangana. So I need to give us some shout outs to people that have helped formed my career. Another one is Isaac Zakaria, unfortunately, who's passed away. May his soul rest in peace. I miss him, by the way. Anyway, Isaac Dangana, I remember in primary school we were 6, and he was asked what he wanted to do, just like a teacher asked us, a certain Mr. Jonathan, who's now passed, again, may his soul rest in peace. He asked what we wanted to do, and I said medical doctor, I think. Medical doctor or lawyer was one of the two. Top every Nigerian family, medical doctor, engineering, or law, right? That's the top 3. Anyway, and he said aeronautic engineering. I said, and everyone went, "Who was that?" This is Isaac Dangana sitting next to me. And so I asked the teacher, I put my hand back up and asked him to ask me again what I want to do. And he did, and I said, aerospace engineering. I have never looked back since. I went to Aztec from JSS 2. I went to Hyde after the primary school in Kaduna. I went to Hyde Secondary Technical College in Jingri, where I was born. So again, I was delighted to go back to where I was born. I always look back to my roots because I realized that's where you used to get your foundation. So I went back to Jingri. Jingri was just living in the growing up in the city, and now in a village, things were a bit challenging. So we moved from there to Aztec, which is where from JSS 2 I stayed up until 2004, JSS 1, and that's when my dad decided to take us to the UK. And just to make a point, Aztec, I had a great time. It was challenging. I'm a boisterous young man. I maintained that posture, and that put me in a lot of trouble. And a lot of people thought I was quite good in school as well. So I was one of the first, second, third, but I struggled with my maths. And that was something that we can talk on a little bit about. Something that has been the most challenging for me that I had to work through was my maths. And so we managed to, we can talk about when I come to my secondary school, how I had to get that right. But during Aztec time, I think when my dad came 2004 and asked if we wanted to go to England, it took me 2 weeks to accept, because I thought, SS1, I've received all the beatings that prepares me to be a senior prefect. Everybody thought I was going to be a prefect. So I'm like, how can I receive all these beatings? Because that's usually what happens. They beat you and they get you ready, and you get the turn to revenge. So basically, I took the price for something I've never paid back. So if I'm brutal in this interview, you can know that I've still got some pain I need to let go of. So I had a great time in Aztec. I remember getting in trouble for doing various things. The one that sticks out the most is, of course, the one I'm innocent, because that's the one that I want to portray in this video, so you know how good I am, of course. Anyway, no. I think it was one time in Aztec where I had powder on my face. We were studying for an exam, and they saw light from the girls' hostel, and they thought somebody was smoking, and they came there, and everyone disappeared. But because I wasn't doing anything wrong, I kept reading, and so I was the scapegoat. And I remember getting beat to say I was smoking. I've never smoked before. Where would I get? Why it was? I couldn't believe it. So I was like, that's it. I'm leaving this place, but I want my dad to come back from the UK. Blah, 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 blah. You know, do you know who my dad is? My dad is the president of the Northwest Nigerian Conference, who's in the UK doing ABCD. You know, you now look into your, and the principal look at me like, and you were smoking. Anyway, cut the long story short, I was then vindicated in the end, and I was still waiting for my sorry, which never came. But anyway, in the when we arrived in the UK, my maths, I was a U student in Aztec. I used to get first, second, third in the overall year sometimes, but I would fail math. So I used to get like 90s in these other subjects. Sometimes as some subjects I was getting 100, they had to remark my paper to make sure, how is it possible? Because I knew I had to do so well in all these things because maths was always going to be a failure. And so I had this failure almost like hanging behind me. And if I look back, it's always there. I've not got rid of it. I don't know if you've seen an image of a cat that had something with him and every time he looks back, he gets completely scared and keeps running. And as fast as he runs, the thing comes as fast as he's running. So I felt like that was what was happening with maths with me. And a pivotal moment happened when I was in the UK, when I arrived at Rhodes Way School. They put me in one of the worst schools in the area because that's what they do with immigrants. And Mr. Gwanzura, when he marked his first test, he called everyone and called their grade, and he called mine, and I got a U grade, an unclassified. Basically, he didn't even bother to mark it because there's nothing to mark. And he said, some of you are laughing at this African boy, but he's probably going to come and do more than all of you. I remember my first day in class, I had a sandal, because that's what we wear to school. We wear sandals and socks to school. Everybody wears trainers there, nobody wears sandals, so they were just making me, I was fresh. If you say freshy, normally when they call people fresh, it's like your Kawenchi, your villageness is too strong. Mine was above par. But anyway, I saw through that, and that hope that a teacher tells me that I can succeed, that I can do better than somebody, I can do some of them for once in maths, inspired me. And I think that's the genesis. And I want to give credit to Mr. Gwanzura. I don't know if he ever sees this or hears this, but he changed my life, just that sentence. And I'm hoping that this interview, hopefully I can tell whoever is watching this that they can do whatever they want to do in spite of the circumstances that they're going through, in spite of how difficult it is. You just got to dig deep and find it within yourself. I remember opening my math textbook. I don't know what I was looking at. Literally, I opened the first. I started out just, let me do anything to just add a mark or two. And I realized the best way to do it systematically, and that's important as well. You've got to have a strategy for what you want to achieve and be willing to start from the start. And so that's what I did. I opened the math textbook. I said, you know what, I'm keep going forward. Opening things is not making sense. It starts making sense, then I realized there's something before that I haven't done. So I thought, let's do this thoroughly. Let's start from the scratch. So I opened the first page in the math textbook, and not a word of a lie, I worked through this whole textbook to the end. This was my individual study. I had homework in class and everything else. I did my GCSEs, by the way, in a year. GCSEs in the UK, it's a 2-year course, and everyone knows it's a difficult time where you got to prove yourself, do lots of coursework. I did all of mine in 1 year. So I had no life when I left the UK. Literally, I went home. My parents can tell you I'm reading. I go to colleges when my friends were playing football. I had an opportunity perhaps to follow football. I'm quite skilled as a striker. Some people were talking about Arsenal and a few things, but it was just no longer. I had to deliver this aerospace engineering, especially that one of my friends who's died, Alpha Bindas, may his soul rest in peace. I remember having this conversation with him about what I wanted to do. First, it started with like mockery. Dude, you've never been in an aircraft. Nobody in your whole village has been in an aircraft. And you want to go and design the aircraft like a joke, as we do with friends. We did that. But part of the last conversations we had with him was, listen, we can achieve whatever we want to achieve. So I felt like it's not beholden on me. I have this opportunity. I'm in the UK. I can study these subjects now, and I can actually do this thing. But of course, when I went to university, this is now going through past school, getting to university. On day one, I was told I was going to be an international student. International student means basically you pay your fees yourself, and most importantly, you pay 3 times what everyone else is paying. So my dad is a full-time student. That's why we're there. My mom is working as a nurse, earning decent wage, just enough to support what my dad is doing, and him working as well as the support he got from Babcock towards the latter stages of his studies. But myself, more importantly, for myself anyway at the time, and to this interview, it was going to be, well, you can't start uni. So I took a year out, worked. All I could raise was £5,000. My fees was £11,000 a year, plus maintenance, plus upkeep. You know, that's at least 17 grand a year. So I worked full time while studying full-time, effectively. I remember a lady saying to me, "You're studying aerospace engineering, isn't that like rocket science? Do you talk about rockets?" "Yeah, so you're a rocket scientist." I find it hard to accept that, but I actually realized, modesty aside, that was really difficult. I remember looking at things in the class thinking, what is this? When he talks about a rudder and an elevator and all these things, I have to go and search a picture of an aircraft to actually work out what it is. Because these people flown, their families are in aerospace, they've flown this thing. I was trying to catch up. It's like you're talking about a car and you're thinking steering, oh, what's the steering wheel? But you're really studying about how to design it and how to build it. So everything was playing catch up. And I think that it's now got to a point where I've realized it's not about the obstacles that I face in life, it's about my mindset. The mindset is what really changes who you are. Your mindset is what tells you that yes, there's a problem in front of you, but actually after the problem there might be something of it. So you don't focus on the problem because that's all you see. You look at both the problems, be open to it, but also motivate yourself to go past that. So for me, it was something that I quickly worked at, and I give credit to Associate Professor Mavalla, who happens to be my dad, which I'm proud of. My dad has been a strong force behind my wings. I remember going to uni, he said, "Don't worry, son, we're going to make it. Just trust in God." Trust in God? What? £11,000 a year, you're working, you're paying yours, he's not even working because he's studying full time, doing his PhD. Somehow, I graduated. Somehow. I can't tell you how many times they've locked me out of the system. How many tests I was not able to submit because my login on Blackboard online was not available, which meant that I don't know how I passed. Just to make the story straight, if I had said I passed with the first class, then this interview would be easy. I actually got a 2-2. A 2-2 is a grade that is just after that is a third and then a fail. So if you have an A grade as a first, a B grade would be a 2-1 in the UK, and a 2-2 would be like a C grade. So for someone who wants to attain highly and whatever, I didn't do well by any stretch of the imagination. So that could only do one or two things: allow my dream to fall off, or actually gather the same resolve and think about how can I do best with what I've got, this obstacle now. And so it took me 2 years to get a job. Actually, upon finishing my university, I had a placement that I did with a company called Renishaw, and they offered a placement for the job, the internship for a year, after which everyone that does that generally gets a job. So it was in applications engineering, metrology, which is what I did. Metallurgy is basically, metrology and metallurgy is basically, metallurgy is around looking at, my project was around designing a wire feed system. So it's called a direct laser deposition process. You might want to look into this. It's basically where you feed in wire and powder and use additive manufacturing. So a laser melts that part, the layers that has been put in, to form a shape, so you can design all sorts. This room could be made out of that, or anything. This button, this microphone, anything could be made out of additive manufacturing when it makes sense. So that was my job, was to design a wire feed system that will deliver very small micrometers of wires, control it, keeping it taut so that it's measured, because you don't want to put too much wires, you want to put the right amount. How do you measure that? So it was something that was going to put that, and it's basically a simple principle that I used. Some of my engineers thought, how have you come up with this? It's a simple thing called the sewing machine that you see everywhere in Nigeria. Every tailor has it. It's basically, how do they put the thread in it to keep it taut so that they can use it to sew? So it's that same principle, coming back to basics, the most simple thing that perhaps we look at down on tailors in Nigeria here, but that skill is something that I thought has actually helped me. And I've realized, regardless of how far you go, it's the little things, it's the small people that if you don't pay attention to, it's the people that I say small people that society says they're not achieving things. I think that's where a lot of the innovation comes from. And so I've designed this thing and everyone is singing my praises, but really it was a tailor whom I don't know his name that I sort of worked with, and I remember what he'd done that sort of brought that idea. Of course, I added some ideas to it and I improved it to get to what we wanted, but that's generally where the idea came from. Upon graduating university, 2012, I had an accident just before Renishaw, starting with Renishaw, the placement. You can see this car here. So I had this accident and I was on a bike, so like Tour de France, those thin tire bikes, and I was belting it down. Unfortunately, I wasn't wearing a helmet, which meant that obviously I was going to hurt myself. I was hearing the headphones, like one of the headphones one of your recorders are wearing. And so basically, when a car was coming, and I was coming the bike, I was going down the road. I had a high-vis vest on though, and the car caught me. And I tried to avoid the car, but I couldn't. So I hit the car and I fell down on my head. And people thought I was dead. That's another story that I give glory to God for my life, because at that point, I think they came and said, "Is he dead?" And I go hear people. I passed out for a bit. I hear people say, "Is he dead?" I'm thinking, is this it? Am I somewhere else? You know, I don't believe that we die, you sleep. But I was thinking, and I saw a bright light, basically. Like, because of my eyes trying to open, I'm thinking, am I in heaven? Bright lights, like the lights in the studio. Anyway, I opened my eyes, and the next thing I heard was blood gushing. It was like they opened a tap in my head. Everything was coming there. So I put my hands in my head. Cut a long story short, it took me another 2 years before I could get another job offer. And I did all sorts. I cleaned bathrooms. I washed toilets. I did sales, telephone calls, where you call people to sell to them the job that no one wants to do. The only thing I couldn't do was care in the UK, which is wipe somebody, not because of pride, because I'm very nauseous like my dad. I remember one time I actually tried it. I tried everything. I actually tried it, and I ended up puking on the person I was supposed to clean. So I cleaned the puke and the poo in the end. So just to let you know that it's just something I couldn't do. But there's nothing else. Factory. I remember working with some people, some Polish guys that were 3 times my size. You know, lifting, offloading trucks. In the UK, you get paid per hour, so there's no discrimination again. It doesn't matter what you're doing. And that's one thing that I think will help my country. If no one looks down at the person who's doing the garden to the professor who's just driven in, you're all adding value. And that's one thing. Of course, there's different disparities in life, even in the UK, but generally, no one looks down on you. And that's something that I thought, you know what, I'm just going to crack on with this and try and earn as much. And that's generally a mindset that if my dad was a pastor and he was doing support work at some point before he did other things, and he, you know, did some menial jobs as well. You know, he's shown me that he can do it. So what am I? You know, I did paper round, you know, putting papers in people's newspaper into people's houses and getting £3-4 from since I was 16. So anyway, cut the long story short, when I got to finishing 2 years later, I finished 2012. 2014 was when I got my first job, and it took me to go to Italy to do a 6-month stint. It's called Leonardo da Vinci Project, similar to Erasmus, and it was an opportunity for me to learn a new language. So I have A2 certificate Italian, so I can speak a little bit. So parlo un po' in italiano, so I speak a little bit of Italian. I stayed there for 6 months. I had intensive lessons for a week, another intensive lesson when I got there for a week, and then of course I lived in a place called Lecce, the south of Italy, Puglia, and it was the first time a Surubu boy has left England to Nigeria and now going to a second country. That's all I knew, England and Nigeria, never gone anywhere else. So I went to Italy now. I'm thinking, life is important. Traveling is important. That's where you get to learn things. I remember saying to my dad, Kauyenchi in Hausa is when you're acting like a village person, like a fresh. Kauyenchi is not necessarily that you're coming from the village. Kauyenchi basically means when you don't understand how things is done in a vicinity. And I was coming from London. I was getting the bus the wrong way because they have a certain system. I was buying things. I couldn't speak the language. I remember I went to buy milk. I couldn't remember what milk is. I said, whoa, I'm giving them the person I'm buying the cow. Look at me like, is this black person? Is it okay? I didn't have internet on my phone, so I had to go back, travel back. Because it was a village in the south, no one could speak English, so I had to go back home just to go and look at how to buy milk, the word milk, and I couldn't find it in the shelf. And it was a crazy time, but that taught me quite a lot of things. It's important to come out of your comfort zone to realize some of the things we take for granted. I just want to buy milk, give it to me. I just want to get a bus. How do you get into a bus? I just want to study. Basic things. And when you come out of your comfort zone, you look back and you realize the achievements you've made and also the things that you can add to your life. And that's why it was very important for me to do that. And when I did that, I learned a language. First engineering job, I was a mechanical design engineer at the University of Salento, which is in Puglia, Lecce. And I remember doing a design process to optimize its internal combustion engine. So looking at how to optimize and control flame controllability in a lean combustion engine. So it's basically on a CATIA card, you design the system, and then you look at if you put in hot air, how do you maximize that combustion engine to produce more torque or whatever the output is. And so that was a project I did for 6 months successfully. And when I came back to the UK I came back in July, and in August I started with ADS Group. ADS Group is the trade association for UK aerospace, defense, space and security. I started as the aerospace executive. I remember telling one of my friends what my job title was and what I was doing, and I showed him my card and he laughed. Typically of some of the challenges I faced in life. When I tell when you tell people what you want to achieve, remember I said the joke that could have destroyed my dreams or actually made me believe to make this person right, is he laughed. How the hell are you an aerospace executive? You and I finished 2012, we're looking for jobs. What is that? What executive for what? I remember in the first few months I made a lot of mistakes, and one man messaged me, how are you an executive? This is a white guy. How are you an executive? And he cuts more for some reason. What executive of what? How are you in this? What are you talking about? You don't even understand the way you speak. I don't even understand you. Can you speak clearly? I'm speaking good English. He said, can you speak clearly? Basically what he's trying to tell me is let me know that I'm black and I don't speak the way he speaks. So what right do I have to be in this room? And you feel small, you feel finished. But every opportunity that I've had to face a challenge for me is an opportunity to give birth to something. It's when I believe that we go back to what I said, when you take yourself out of a comfort zone, you look back and you realize what you've achieved, so you get the confidence to move forward. And my dad always tells me this, unless you've forgotten where God has taken you, you have nothing to fear. If you look back, you realize where he's taking you, you have nothing to fear for the future, because the future is just, at some point, becomes the past. At some point, right? So it's just a case of it's a cycle being repeated, and I think this is something that I hope your viewers will lean to and actually derive some inspiration from, because it's something that's actually helped me quite a lot. So I'm now starting at ADS in 2014 as the aerospace executive. My first job in a month, I was arranging a ministerial meeting with the outgoing, who just left, secretary, health secretary, Matthew Hancock, MP. Matthew Hancock was the business secretary at BASE, Department for Business, Enterprise, Industrial Strategy at the time. And my first meeting was I was leading a program actually called the Aerospace Growth Partnership. The Aerospace Growth Partnership is a collaborative effort between industry, UK aerospace industry, and government to advance the sector. £2.9 billion was what the project was worth, and during my tenure, we managed to extend it to £3.9 billion. So I was responsible for managing this. I had, for the first time, people I was managing, industry, the key companies table, so Airbus, Bombardier, Spirit, Safran, all the top tier companies sit around the board and their leaders. So the most senior people in aerospace, I was managing, and I was putting together an agenda, and I was driving the agenda, and I understood, of course, what my bosses wanted me to achieve, but I had an opportunity to shape industry and shape strategy and work with it. And that was completely a baptism by fire, but it's something that I embraced. My dad has been an administrator. I leaned to him for lots of support when I was in a completely dark place. I remember, I'm not going to say names because this could be seen widely, but having to tell a very senior person in industry that I don't think he's the right person for this meeting because somebody else should be. But how do you do that? You have to learn tact. And I had to say, actually, I'm going to leave it to you guys to decide and give me a name. But I knew by leaving it to them too, the person I wanted was the person who was going to come through, rather than speaking and saying. So you've got to learn how to address people. And I could learn quickly how to deal with the most senior people and how they like to be spoken to, and the most junior people, all within a space of a very short time. And that career, working at ADS Group, supporting aerospace member companies, looking at Farnborough Air Show, the own Farnborough Air Show, the largest air show in the world, was a baptism by fire, unprecedented exposure. Most people need to work in their companies as engineers, doing bolts and nuts, and then they get to whatever, and then maybe 15, 20 years time, they can come out of their companies to represent their company and industry. But I had that from day one. Upon finishing ADS Group, 2016, I remember thinking, okay, I've done this job for 2 years now. And as you know, it's typical of millennials, settle in the West. It takes 2 years for you to either move up this ladder or you think about it. You can stay in a job and gain the same experiences for just so many years and you're not moving forward. And I'm somebody who doesn't want to stay stagnant. I want to keep moving. And I thought, okay, I've done this job now. And I remember my boss saying to me, listen to me. I've been in the industry for 30 years. I know how this goes. You need to stay here because, and I realized, why is he telling me this? Is he doing this for me or for him? And I realized he came in, when I started ADS Group, actually, I was there as the aerospace executive and we didn't have an aerospace director. So he came in a few months later. So it took a while for him, of course, to learn the industry, and I was helping with that process as much as all of my superiors. So he was a very pivotal support person through my career. But at this time, I didn't believe that the advice he was giving me was what was best for me, and I realized that I needed to leave. So I had to say, I'm sorry, I really appreciate all the support you've given me, but I'm gonna have to go. And it so happened that the AGP chairman at the time, Marcus Bryson, was a strong influence in my career, and he said to me, part of the AGP was that we were delivering 500 MSc bursaries to industry so that they can stay in industry and advance the sector. The sector needed MSc level engineers, and so I didn't have an MSc. I got a 2-2. I've got a potential to get funding. I know I don't have that money to go and pay my school fees, so this is going to fund me. So of course I'm going to take it. So that's what happened. I took that bursary. I interviewed. I had to pass the interview, of course, which I thankfully did. But being the Aerospace Growth Partnership program lead and then interviewing for its bursary, I think everybody will say there's some advantages there because I knew what the program was trying to achieve. So I got this funding and I went to Cranfield. Cranfield, I studied aircraft vehicle design. The reason why I did technical, although I've been in commercial aerospace, was I wanted to test myself technically. I also wanted to prove to myself that I can do it because I didn't do it very well at University of Liverpool, where I did my undergraduate, where I got a 2-2. But also at Cranfield was an opportunity for me to do technical. So then if I decide I want to start a technical career after studying MSc, you can do that. But if I decide I want to come back to commercial, I've now got enough technical acumen to lean onto, because when you're designing projects, you have a conversation with engineers, you need to know what you're talking about. So I did Cranfield. Turned out I did very well. I got the finally. I did very well in the first I was looking for, and I now had confidence for once. I understood aircraft. I've done a bit of work in the industry. I've seen a lot of aircraft, so I didn't have to think what was the rudder when the lecturer is talking about a rudder that controls the yaw motion of an aircraft, or the elevator that controls the pitch. So basically, there's, I guess, for the benefit of your industry, for your viewers, an aircraft has three main motions. It pitches up to go up, pitches down to go down, and that you use the elevator. This is what's on the empennage on the back of the aircraft. It tilts down and up to control it. You have a rudder on the back which tilts this way, and that controls the yaw motion that does this, so the aircraft turns right or left. And then you have another motion which is of course rolling. So this is when you use the ailerons on the wings. The ailerons one deflects one way and it turns the aircraft that way or whatever. So with a combination of this motion, your pitch, your yaw, and your roll, you can just about turn, you can just about do whatever. And so those are key basic things I needed to know. It took me to finish, or close to finishing, to actually have this embedded in me as a basic. And so you can imagine the challenge. But of course, when I went to Cranfield, I now had the understanding of these things, aircraft design. It just happened that we finished and I was the program lead for the project. We designed an A16M aircraft, which is a high aspect ratio turboprop aircraft for Airbus. And so Airbus were the customers. When we finished, we did what the critical design was called, a critical design review, where we presented to industry. And being the program lead, I was also asked to be the host. And that was my first time speaking in front of camera, like I am now, speaking to industry with my classmates and everyone else, and industry could ask questions. It was really exciting time, but it was a daunting process. You know, I'm telling myself, how am I leading a pack of 45 engineers? How am I even being the host? Because if you ask a question and no one answers it, then I have to give an educated answer, because I'm part of the course. I'm not just hosting it as a guest host or anything. So it turned out really well. I had job offers from BAE Systems to do engineering. GBAE Systems, there's this program they call the Sigma program, which has been discontinued now. They took 2 people a year. You have 18,000 people applying to this, they take 2 people a year. When we did the interview, went through the online interview, the telephone interview, the assessment center interview, with hard work, prayer, I wanted this job. And like, as you know, I'm focused and I get tunnel vision. I did everything there is to do I could possibly to get this job. It just so happens that after the interview, before I got home, we got a call that the opposition has been offered to me, but they're not quite sure about whether they're going to give the second person, because I was far apart to everyone else. And for the other ones, there was too many close calls on them, so they're going to decide and they'll let them know. I said, who's the other person? So I was like, how is it possible that I've got this job? So then in my mind, I was thinking, okay, finally, the pen is dropping. There's opportunities. But of course, I was asked that I wasn't asked, but because I was Nigerian citizenship, and I didn't have a British citizenship, the job is working in defense, so I needed a British citizenship, which they were prepared to support me for. However, I would have to relinquish my Nigerian citizenship if I wanted to do that job. For a job, to relinquish my patriotism, I'm a proud Nigerian. How do I do that? So unfortunately, cut the long story short, I decided that I wasn't going to go after the job, and I was going to let go of that opportunity and do other things. So I chose my country basically over career at that point. So I'm hoping that at some point my country would choose me. But anyway, I hope that I can do my country proud in continuing to do what I do, which is the ultimate goal for me, to come and help aviation industry in Nigeria. I've had various meetings. I've had opportunities to speak with the current Minister of Aviation, Hadi Sirika. We've met at Farnborough. There's various projects that I've come here also with my bosses from Cranfield when we came to look at how we can help advance the autonomous drone sector here in Nigeria, to actually build an aerospace sector. We're talking about currently designing the first maintenance and repair and overhaul center either in Abuja or Lagos. The company has won that, and I'm still hoping that Kushika Aerospace can play a role in supporting and growing this very important project, because what it does is it means if airlines break down, they don't have to go to South Africa or Ethiopia to take all the parts, and everything stops, and that's a huge expense. And that expense, who pays for it? The average customer. Who's the average customer? Is the everyday Nigerian. And that's why our price for flight is still expensive. When we can bring maintenance costs down, the airlines can charge a bit less to still make decent profit, and that means that the everyday Nigerian will feel that pressure. So it's a key project, as far as I'm concerned, amongst the number of projects that the government has, rightly in my view, put together to advance various sectors, one of which is the aviation sector that I'm party to. So I have high hopes of the Nigerian aviation sector, and hopefully we can start doing some aerospace. Aerospace is actually the difference between aerospace and aviation. Aerospace is, if you think, designing a car, so designing the aircraft, and aviation is taxis, so what you do with it after you make the aircraft or the car in the example I've made. So aviation, so that's aviation is flying, airlines, maintenance, all of this stuff. So that's inspired. So I'm very much aerospace, not aviation. However, I have interest in both aspects, and so clearly I believe that I have the right capacity and the contacts within the UK aerospace sector, and acknowledgement of where the key points are to advance and help, using some of the experience I've had with some of the companies I've worked with as well to support this. So that is part of the things that I'll be doing here whilst I'm in Nigeria. December 2020 is when I had the lowest moment in my life. We went through, due to COVID, aviation was, a lot of numbers are coming down. People are not flying as much and not flying at all at some point in certain places. And so therefore, it's affected economies in various ways, and we all know that, so I'm not going to go into the detail of that, but it meant that my company had to also react to that. And so therefore, I was first round of redundancy. I was kept, somebody left. I thought, okay, I'm the youngest in the team, I'm privileged to be here, but I believe I had a value to bring, which was what the company is currently doing, which is working on Project Fresson. So part of my input into our strategy was to look at government funded support. Remember, I said I came from public sector, AGP, government funding, where the opportunities are. I worked with a company called ATI as well, consulting with them for a short while. So I had an understanding of where the opportunities are and where to go to. And so I helped signpost the company into that. And so I was confident that when it came to the redundancy round, I may be spared. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. Somebody else was kept, which in their right, they were quite more experienced than I am. Of course, it broke me in a small way. I don't allow anything to get to me longer than a day. So I remember feeling low. I remember feeling confused. I was working for a company that paid me decent wage. I had a brand new Mercedes E-Class, which gave me a lot of confidence. I'm a young man at the end of the day. You're driving a new car, probably the best car you could see around based on what I needed for me at the time. That made sense. I was earning comfortable. I started planning what I want to do. I want to buy a house. I want to do this. In fact, I've been trying to buy a house for years. I'm just thinking of which house should I buy in the UK. I'll take my time. Again, you can, just because you achieve things in life doesn't mean that they're not points where you can look back and say, I was being a bit, I wasn't bold. I just needed to buy that house. I just needed to do those things that I needed to do, like I always say. But sometimes it takes difficulty to actually get you to achieve your goals. And so it was when I got made redundant in December 2020 that I stopped to think, to review what's going on. What do I do next? Do I apply for a job and go back through the same process? First of all, not many people are applying because of the circumstances based on COVID is happening. There's few opportunities coming through, but I then decided, a few companies came to me and said, can you consult for us? Can you help us do this? You know this? And I said, actually, yeah, it makes sense. So one day I just decided, I'm going to have a go at this. It didn't take a lot of thinking. I just prayed. I just set up the company. It takes 10 minutes to set up a limited companies in the UK on Company House. And I did that, and we've not looked back ever since.
No story is told if no life is touched.
No story is told if no one is transformed.
We share stories that touch light and transform your world view.
Like this, I shouted and I jumped up.
At night when you're sleeping, you start hearing strange sounds.
It was about 2 o'clock when his brother called me and said he had stopped breathing.
They would tell us in the assembly, if boys touch you, you get pregnant.
I don't know where to get the money from. I've been getting calls. I could not go to school, nothing. And I'd be like, what am I going to do? Then,
giving you direction and bringing hope. Stories from pools of experiences, real people sharing to inspire, untailored, unquoted, unexaggerated, but raw.
She has not been enjoying sex with me.
True and verifiable stories told by mortal individuals that you may learn and be inspired. Share and inspire. True stories, real people.
Kusheka Aerospace is a company that was set up in March 2020. Kusheka Aerospace is focused on delivering value to UK aerospace, defense, space and security industries around 3 main areas: strategy, business development and funding. So how to you make sure that your strategy is robust, just like what I did at Cranfield, and relevant to industry, and ensuring that you've not missed anything and you can improve on yourself. Business development, how to sell as a company, the best opportunities where they are, and also funding, where to get the right funding to inject into R&D or whatever to grow your business. And so these are the services that Kusheka Aerospace is offering to the sectors I've mentioned. And how do you get to this? Some of these things, I think, you just a leap of faith. I remember thinking, am I old enough to have the right experiences? But you just start. My first client was Innovate UK. I was put on as the Innovate UK Edge Scale-Up Program Specialist on Aerospace, Defense, Automotive, and I remember when I had this conversation, surely, you know, when you apply for something and you have a conversation with somebody, in fact, they came to me and said, would you be interested in this? I thought, surely not. What these guys were going to pay me for a day is probably what I earn in 2 weeks previously. I don't want to say the figures, but it wasn't about the money. It was the opportunity as well to work with various companies to pick what areas I was interested in, and it was just baffling. It was really exciting for me to be able to do this, and I think that it's important for one to put themselves out, to try things even when there's doubts. I don't see myself as brave whatsoever, but I certainly know that I have a lot of fears that I fight and I try to overcome every day. One of them was setting up Kusheka Aerospace. Once I've put my name out there that I'm involved with it, if it fails now, I become a failure with this. And so that was a fear. I didn't want to. Some people say, why don't you come apply in my company? We're offering this. I think, I don't want to have to do this again. I want to take my destiny into my own hands. I've always maintained I wanted to be, to retire by 40 and not work for anyone, to do my things. But I thought this is an opportunity to do that now. Industry is not hiring a lot, so various companies can pay for a small part of my time, which allows me to manage my time and earn a lot more even. So that was the opportunity that I took, and in the end, since setting up Kusheka Aerospace, I've since set up a property business called Vala Villa Properties. Vala, credit to Kako Mavalla for providing that inspiration, that name, and also since then I've been involved with a company called Aris Via. They're involved in flight simulation. So part of pilot training, there's a ground school element of that, the early part, and so they're developing VIA technologies to help expedite that process, and we've just closed our first 2 angel investors into the business. So when I go back to the UK, I'll be flat out busy managing 3 businesses, of which Kusheka Aerospace has just signed a new contract with a company called Tara's Metrology, and of which I'll be their head of commercial. So Kusheka Aerospace will be offering that services in terms of helping that startup to grow, and it's part of University of Nottingham. University of Nottingham have a big record in pushing through and commercializing innovation. If you have a goal and you're too comfortable in that goal, then it's not a goal, it's not a dream. A dream needs to be something that you need to stretch a few times to get to, so that you're pushing yourself effectively. And I think that's important to dream big, it's important to stay grounded, it's important to realize that without God, nothing can be achieved. And I think that if you, as my dad always taught me, and I want to close with that, if you don't forget where God has taken you to in life, then you have nothing to fear for the future. And if God owns all of this world, as I always believed, then I thought to myself, well, if the world is God's and I have nothing to fear because He's already brought me this far, so what stops me from wanting to be a Minister of Aviation in Nigeria? And that's my dream.